So thankful for the presence of everyone this morning. For those that have been away, the travelers and the rows, we're thankful for their safe return. For the many that struggle with their health, if not on a daily basis, nearly a daily basis, and have not been able to come for the last Sunday or so, we're thankful for your well-being and us enabling you to be able to be with us this morning. For the widows and the widowers, we certainly appreciate your diligence and coming and worshiping together to encourage all of us, that we can all be encouraging to one another. You know, worship that we render unto God is to be in spirit and in truth. Truth, we know, is God's word, because God's word is truth. But the spirit is that which you and I individually, personally, are responsible for. When we sing, are we giving attention to the words that we're singing? Well, after all, we're teaching and admonishing one another. So are we aware of the words that we're speaking in song? When Jeremy or anyone else leads us in the prayers that are prayed, are we meditating a silent prayer? Are we mimicking their words and paying attention so that when the end of the prayer comes, either outwardly or inwardly ourselves, that we're able to say amen, so be it, to the things that have been worded in prayer? And then to be able to do as we have done, to partake of the Lord's Supper, the unleavened bread, the fruit of the vine, and to do that, as Brother Gerald very clearly pointed out, in remembrance of him. That is the only way in which we're going to be able to observe the worthy manner in which we are to partake of the Lord's Supper. Otherwise, we eat and drink damnation unto our souls. Then now, as we're about to look into God's word, does our minds, is our hearts attuned to God's word? Are we receiving it, not as the words of men, but as it is in truth, the word of God? And then in just a few moments, we will be laid by and in store. That too requires a purpose of heart, that we're to do so as we have purposed in our hearts, so let us give. So all of these things will determine as Christians, but you and me. So worship can be in truth, but whether or not it will be in spirit is up to you and I individually. So we're thankful for our time together and pray that we will encourage each other, that we will be striving to live our lives from day to day, that we can sojourn here in this world and have the hope of heaven when this life is over. In Zephaniah chapter 1 and verse 12, we want to read, "And it shall come to pass at that time that I shall search Jerusalem with lamps and punish the men who are settled in complacency, who say in their heart, the Lord will not do good, nor will he do evil." What I want us to focus on in this verse is that phrase, settled in complacency. What we mean and what the inspired writer meant by the use of that word is that complacency is a feeling of quiet pleasure or security. It's often while unaware of some potential danger, defect, or the like. Another definition is self-satisfaction or smug satisfaction with an existing situation, condition, or etc. What we need to understand concerning the time in which Zephaniah wrote was during the period of the divided kingdom. Israel is no more as a nation. All that is left is Judah. And of course, Judah has sinned. And certain consequences are going to be suffered. So it was sin that caused the downfall of Judah, that led them into Babylonian captivity at the hands of Nebuchadnezzar. So sin was the cause of their downfall. So the question is, could we, you and I, be complacent? And could we be like they, settled in complacency? I want us to first look and to consider this phrase, settled in complacency. I want us to look at it from several other different translations. Of course, what I've read in Zephaniah 1 and verse 12 was from the New King James, and it said, settled in complacency. And if you have one that is a particular publication that has the center column reference, then you might see that literally on the lees, like the dregs of wine. The English Standard Version says men who are complacent, and the footnote from the Hebrew is are thickening on the dregs of their wine. The King James, and of course the American Standard Version, says settled on the lees. The New American Standard, the 1995 edition, says stagnant in spirit. The Harmon Christian Standard Bible says men who settled down comfortably. The New International Version, who are complacent, who are like wine left on its dregs. The New Revised Standard Version, who rest complacently on their dregs. And then the New Literal Translation says they sit complacent in their sins. The New English Translation, entrenched in their sins. The Revised Standard Version says thickening upon their lees. And Young's Literal Translation says hardened on the preserved things. So what we see in these translations that we've just looked at is that this phrase, settled in complacency, refers to the fermentation process of wine. And we see a similar verse of scripture when Jeremiah wrote in Jeremiah 48 and verse 11, Moab has been at ease from his youth. He is settled on his dregs and has not been emptied from vessel to vessel, nor has he gone into captivity. Therefore his taste remaineth in him, and his scent has not changed. And so really to find out more about the lees or the dregs that we're seeing here and in the other translations of Zephaniah 1 and verse 12, I want us to do a quote from this handbook that is a translator's handbook on the book of Zephaniah, and see that this will help us to understand better. I will punish the men who are thickening upon the lees. The Hebrew metaphor is drawn from the process of winemaking. When the wine was fermented, it has to be poured from one vessel to another to separate the wine from the sediment, which is called lees. This process is described in Jeremiah 48 and verse 11. Remember, we just read where Jeremiah says they have not been emptied from vessel to vessel. Then he goes on and says, if this is not done, the wine becomes too sweet and spoils. The verb translated thickening means condense or congeal. The men who are thickening upon their lees are people who have enjoyed uninterrupted wealth for too long and have thus become self-satisfied and confident. And to get sort of a visual picture of what we've just read, this is what we're talking about. What we're seeing here is a wine barrel. Here is the wine, but here is the sediment. And that's what the scriptures are referring to as lees or dregs, this settlement. And that's why the barrels have to be poured from one to the other and strained in order to get rid of this sediment. Otherwise, as it says, it would get too sweet that it would spoil. What's the point? What's the point of what Zephaniah is saying in that first chapter, verse 12, to the people of Judah? The point is that being made is that they are indifferent. Spiritually, they're stagnant. And I think we talked about that a little bit in our study last week. What stagnant means. We used the illustration of water to help us to understand. If water is moving, or if there is a stream, or if there is a spring that's coming into it, the water will stay fresh. But if the water is not moving, there is no stream, there's no spring coming into it, it will stagnate. And any fish or anything that's living in that water, after the oxygen has all been used up, because of that's what stagnation does, everything in that will die, whether it's a pond or whether it's a lake. And so that's what we're seeing here in terms of spirituality. And we said that when we become spiritually stagnant, the only thing that lays ahead is spiritual death. So that's the point, that they are indifferent. They're satisfied. And that's where the word settled comes in. To be settled is to be satisfied. They're satisfied. They're not moving from the satisfactory state that they're in. The point also is that they're comfortable in the present condition, even though God's people will often warn about this thing that we're seeing, complacency. In Psalms 1 and verse 32, here's what we see: for the turning away of the simple will slay them, and the complacency of fools will destroy them. It is in Isaiah 32, verses 9 through 11. Rise up, you women who are at ease. Read it up on the screen. Hear my voice. You complacent daughters, give ear to my speech. In a year and some days you will be troubled, you complacent women. For the vintage will fail, the gathering will not come. Tremble, you women who are at ease. Be troubled, you complacent ones. Strip yourself, make yourself bare, and gird sackcloth on your waist. Then Amos, another one of the minor prophets to Judah, made this statement in the 6th chapter, verse 1. Woe to you who are at ease in Zion, and trust in Mount Samaria, notable persons in the chief nation, to whom the house of Israel comes. Go over to Canaan and see, and from there go to Hamath the great, and then go to Gath of the Philistines. Are you better than these kingdoms? Or is their territory greater than your territory? Woe to you who put far off the day of doom, who cause the seat of violence to come near, who lie on beds of ivory, stretch out on your couches, eat lambs from the flock, calves from the midst of the stall, who sing idly to the sound of stringed instruments, and invent for yourselves musical instruments like David, who drink wine from bowls, and anoint yourself with the best, not forsaken not anoint yourself with the best ornaments, but are not grieved for the afflictions of Joseph. Jeremiah, remember we always refer to him as the weeping prophet? In the book of Lamentations, in chapter 1 and verse 12, he says, is it nothing to you, all you who pass by? Behold and see if there is any sorrow like my sorrow, which has been brought on me, which the Lord has inflicted in the day of his fierce anger. Jeremiah was concerned concerning Judah, but Jeremiah knew rightfully so that their complacency and their sin was at risk of the destruction. And then again, Isaiah in Isaiah 57 and verse 1, the righteous perishes, and no man takes it to heart. Merciful men are taken away, while no one considers that the righteous is taken away from evil. So now we see what this phrase has reference to in terms of being settled in complacency. Let's look at the context a little bit more so. The overall message of the book of Zephaniah is the day of the Lord is coming. I want us to get our Bibles and turn to Zephaniah. And I want us to look here at what we're talking about concerning the message. In chapter 1 and verse 7, be silent in the presence of the Lord God, for the day of the Lord is at hand. For the Lord has prepared a sacrifice. He has invited his guest. See, the day of the Lord is at hand. The Lord is coming in judgment. Look at verse 14. The great day of the Lord is near. It is near and hastens quickly. The noise of the day of the Lord is bitter. There the mighty men shall cry out. Again, twice the day of the Lord. And then it's in verse 18. Neither their silver nor their gold shall be able to deliver them in the day of the Lord's wrath, but the whole land shall be devoured. For the fire of his jealousy, by the fire of his jealousy, for he will have made speedy riddance of all those who dwell in the land. So the day of the Lord is coming, and what that is bringing is destruction. Go back to verse 2 of chapter 1. I will utterly consume everything from the face of the land, says the Lord. And then look at verse 17. I will bring distress upon men. They shall walk like blind men because they have sinned against the Lord. Their blood shall be poured out like dust, and their flesh like refuge. So that's the context of what we're seeing concerning the complacency where he had taken Judah. It brought them to where now the day of the Lord is coming. And this is not talking about final judgment. This is talking about judgment upon nations. Judgments that we can read all through the period of time since man began. God executes judgment, and as Daniel repeatedly stated in the book of Daniel, God is the controller of all nations. God brings them up, he takes them down. And what we're seeing here is an example of that. So that's the message of the book. And the message is clearly also, the context involves their complacency. It can be seen in chapter 1 and verse 5. While we're here with the Bibles open, let's look. Those who worship the host of heaven on the housetops, those who worship and swear oaths by the Lord, but also swear by Milcom. They had their various gods, but they had not forgot the God of heaven. He's still in the mix. So we see in their complacency. Here is seen in their divided loyalty. Then let's look at verse 6, and we see that they had unconcern. They had indifference toward it all. In verse 6, those who have turned back from following the Lord and have not sought the Lord, nor inquired of him. So see, they're totally unconcerned. It doesn't matter what the Lord says. They're really not willing to go there to see what he says. So they're unconcerned. They're indifferent in that manner. And they say, the Lord is not going to do good or evil. The Lord's not going to do nothing. And so in chapter 1 and verse 12, the verse that we read, that's the statement that we recall. It came to pass at that time that I will search Jerusalem with lamps and punish the men who are settled in indifference, who say in their heart, the Lord will not do good, nor will he do evil. So the Lord's out of it. The Lord doesn't care. He's not going to do one thing or another. And we see they trusted in their prosperity. In verse 13, therefore their goods shall become booty, and their houses a desolation. They shall build houses, but not inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards, but not drink their wine. And then we read that verse 18, that neither will their silver nor their gold be able to deliver them in the day of the Lord's wrath, but the whole land shall be destroyed. So again, they trusted in their prosperity, the things that they had, the things in which they had become settled, satisfied. That brought on the complacency that they were experiencing. Then let's look over in chapter 3 and look at verse 2. She has not obeyed his voice. She has not received correction. She has not trusted in the Lord. She has not drawn near to her God. So she's not obeyed. Correction was given, certainly by Zephaniah, by Jeremiah, by many of the prophets that prophesied. Rebuke had been given, but no correction had been made. And they had certainly not drawn near to God. And look at verse 5. The Lord is righteous in her midst. He will do no unrighteousness. Every morning he brings his justice to light. He never fails. But the unjust knows no shame. So here we see their complacency. Here we see then the context of what Zephaniah is all about. What about the application of all this? What application can you and I make of what we see in the example of Judah? Are we comfortable? Are we satisfied? Are we comfortable and satisfied even though we are still practicing sin? Look over in Romans chapter 6. We're going to read just a few verses, not all of the entire chapter. Romans chapter 6, let's look at verse 4. Therefore we were buried with him through baptism into death, that just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so we also should walk in newness of life. We hear that verse quite a bit. We hear the verses prior to that. No doubt as many of us as were baptized into Christ were baptized into his death. So now we're seeing the verse that says, therefore we are buried with him through baptism into death. Therefore, as Christ was raised from the dead, we have been raised to walk in the newness of life as a result of being buried with him in baptism. Now let's look at verse 6. Knowing this, that our old man was crucified with him, that the body of sin might be done away with, that we should no longer be slaves of sin. So what this newness of life is to manifest itself in is that the old man has been put to death. The old man has been crucified, just like Christ was crucified. We were dead in sin. When we were buried with Christ, our sins were washed away in his blood. We've been raised to walk in the newness of life. Therefore, we must no longer be slaves of sin. All right, let's go on to verse 11. Likewise, you also reckon yourselves to be dead indeed to sin, but alive to God in Christ Jesus our Lord. Therefore, do not let sin reign in your mortal body, that you should obey it in its lust. And do not present your members as instruments of unrighteousness to sin, but present yourselves to God as being alive from the dead, and your members as instruments of righteousness unto God. So, are we comfortable? Are we satisfied even though we are still practicing sin, even though there's still sin in our lives, sin that we're unwilling to repent of, sin that we're unwilling to acknowledge. See how it is easy to be settled in complacency? Sin was the problem with Judah. It's our problem today. Sin hasn't gone away. It never goes away. And even though, are we comfortable and satisfied even though we miss a number of services? Ask ourselves that question. You know, maybe we don't want to put ourselves in the category of number one, but what about number two? Are we satisfied? Are we comfortable even though we miss a number of services? And you know, all of this, it just starts out as an occasional thing. It's not that we're something that we plan, that we are deliberate in making sure that we plan it and we carry it out. It's just an occasional absence that happens. But when that happens, it bothers us. Our consciences bother us to a degree, but then little by little we adjust to the idea. We get a little bit more comfortable. We get a little bit more complacent when it comes to just the matter of assembling. And this is always true. The more we miss, and each and every time that we miss, the next time becomes easier. And that's true of anything. It's true of any sin. The more we engage in it, then the less it bothers us, the less our consciences bother us, and the easier it is to do. And you know, missing out on the occasion, what we're really doing is missing out on the occasion to worship God. What other great purpose is there for us to be here? Other than to show our honor, our respect, and our worship to God when those times and opportunities afford themselves. So we're missing out on the occasion to worship God. We're missing out on the occasion to learn His Word. We're missing out on the occasion ourselves to be edified, to be strengthened, to be built up. And not just us, the one that's missing, but by my not being in the assembly, I'm failing to edify others. Remember what we said a moment ago? That's what we do when we teach and admonish one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. If I'm not here to sing, where is my edification to someone else? If my presence is not here, where is my encouragement to someone else's? So it's not just me that's missing out, but it's my not being here that causes others to not be edified, to be strengthened, to be built up. I don't have to quote these verses. Hebrews 10:25, not forsaking the assembling of yourselves together as the manner of some is, but admonishing one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching. We can exhort one another and not be in one another's presence. It can't be done. And Ephesians 5:19, speaking to one another. We can't speak to one another if we're not in one another's presence. But we speak to one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, as well as singing and making melody in our hearts to the Lord. Do you miss about half of the services or more? Really, when it's within your control? Do you feel bad today, but you'll be at work tomorrow? Do you feel bad on Wednesday night, but you'll be at work Thursday morning? So that's what I mean by here's something that's in your control. Here's something that really is an indication of just exactly where seeking first the kingdom of God is in priorities. Are we comfortable and satisfied even though we're lacking in spiritual interest? Do we have a burning zeal? You remember those two men on the road to Emmaus? When Jesus had resurrected from the dead, he joined those two men and he talked with them. And Luke 24 and verse 32 tells us that as they said to one another, did not our hearts burn within us while he talked with us on the road? And while he opened the scriptures to us? Do we have a burning zeal to hear God's word? Do we have a burning zeal to come together with those of like precious faith? Are we like David? Are we glad when they said, let us go up to the house of the Lord? When we thought about it and it came into our minds last evening that this day is Sunday, what was the real thought? What was the real attitude in your mind? Oh no, not the first day of the week. Oh no, got to go to church. Was that it? Is that zeal? If it is, it's misdirected. It's the wrong zeal. It's the wrong zeal. It's zeal for not doing. What is our zeal for doing? So are we comfortable? Are we satisfied? Has worship just simply become a routine? No thought put into it, no anticipation, no expectation. You know, when we get ready to do something like go on a trip or go on a vacation or do anything, we get excited about it. We plan. We can't wait. Zeal for it to occur, zeal for it to happen. What is our zeal for serving God? What is our zeal for worshiping God? What is it? Or is it just something that we have become settled in complacency with? We become comfortable. We become satisfied with just looking upon assembling as just routine, like putting our shoes on in the mornings. You know, we put our shoes on in the morning, most of us do it unthoughtedly. If you have to tie your shoes, you do it unthoughtedly, your mind's somewhere else. So is that what worship has become to us? Routine? Are we not craving? Are we not desiring? Remember what Peter said in 1 Peter 2 and verse 1, therefore laying aside all malice, all deceit, hypocrisy, envy, and all evil speaking. Notice, as newborn babes, desire the sincere milk of the word that you may grow thereby. Talking to Donnie and Kathy with their new grandson about how he seems to have reached that point where he's never satisfied with his hunger. Well, you know how a baby is when it's hungry. You know how it acts, how it certainly desires, and this is what Peter is describing it to, as newborn babes. We need to look upon our spiritual condition to a great extent upon our physical condition. When we were newborn physically and we were hungry, we had nothing else in mind but the desire to be fed. What about us spiritually as newborn babes? And not just newborn babes, but however long it's been since we've obeyed the gospel. Do we desire, do we crave God's word? And are we comfortable and satisfied even though we're lacking in spiritual interest? You know, in all of this, we are consumed in spirit and secular matters. Our lives are consumed. From the time we get up until the time we go to bed, and even after we go to bed, There's things on our minds of a secular nature that we just can't go right off to sleep. So even though are we comfortable and satisfied, even though our minds are so full of our jobs, our education, and all of the material matters that are going on in our lives, and all of that sort of pushes out spiritual things, is that why that we no longer study God's word as we should? Privately, individually? Is that why we no longer pray as much and as often as we used to? Is that why we don't attend gospel meetings at other places like we need to? It's just to the fact that we have all of these secular things going on that spiritual things are getting gradually pushed aside. The cares of the world can, has, and does crowd out the spiritual. And we excuse it all by saying, well, I just don't have time. Study, I don't have time. To pray, I don't have time. To go to someone else's gospel meeting, I don't have time. So, are we comfortable? Are we satisfied? Even though the fact of the matter is that we are being totally consumed with secular things. But do you believe it matters how serious we are? You know, Judah didn't think it mattered. We've quoted Zephaniah 1 and verse 12 a couple of 3 times already. Judah didn't think that it mattered. Whether they sinned, whether they neglected, it didn't matter. God's not going to do good or evil. That's what verse 12 said. So if they sinned or if they neglected to do what God told them to do, no consequences. Nothing to come of it. Is that where we are in our thinking? Because, you know, we live in a day and time where God does not speedily execute judgment. You know, we don't live in a day and time like in the first century, when God speedily executed judgment upon Ananias and Sapphira over what? Over a lie. Over what? Over hypocrisy. Now, do we get it in mind that because God delays his judgment that we're getting by? Is that our thinking? It's easy to creep into that thinking. Well, either I can sin now and God's not going to punish me, or I can sin now and I'll have time to make it right. So let's not have this complacency. Let the children of Judah, let them be our example and see that, and not be the attitude that, well, you know, if I do what's right, I'm not going to be blessed any more or any less. Remember, we did a lesson 2 or 3 weeks ago about Asaph. That was his attitude. All of the wickedness going on around about him, it really didn't matter whether he did good or bad, because he wasn't going to be blessed anymore if he did good, so why be so concerned? But we learned our lesson in that lesson, I hope. And I hope we learn our lesson in this lesson. God's judgment is reserved, yes. But God's judgment is sure. It's certain. And let's have no doubts about it. Some Christians live as if it doesn't matter. But God is rewarding those. God does reward those that diligently seek him. Hebrews 11 and verse 6. We see that without faith it is impossible to please God, for he that comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. The word diligent comes a lot in respects to the word zeal. They're both words that are close kin to one another. If I do something diligently, I do it with zeal, I do it with fervor. So we seek God. How do we seek God? We are to seek God diligently. But again, if we're not careful, if the attitude of complacency is in our hearts and minds, what little bit we're seeking God, we may be careful. We could be like the children of Judah. God is just in the mix. They worshiped all these other idols, but they still had a mind for God. Well, we live in this world that's full of all the things that are vying for our attention and our time and our efforts and our money. But we still give God lip service. He's still in the mix. But see, that's what complacency is. It's divided loyalty. And we as Christians can be just as guilty. And the only way that we can not be guilty is to be sure that we're seeking God diligently. Are we inactive? By that I mean, are we not growing? Peter says in 2 Peter chapter 1, beginning with verse 5, but also for this very reason, given all diligence, and there's our word again, add to your faith virtue, to virtue knowledge, to knowledge self-control, to self-control perseverance, to perseverance godliness, to godliness brotherly kindness, and to brotherly kindness love. Notice what Peter is saying, add. We first start with faith, and we know how that comes. It comes from the hearing of God's word. So we have faith. Now we're to add to that faith. And here are the things that are specifically stated. Can we add anything? Can we add anything of a secular nature if we don't have diligence? No. Are you going to go anywhere in your job if you don't have diligence? Are you going to go anywhere in school if you don't have diligence to get your homework, to do the best you can? We understand how that diligence is required in all of these physical, secular things. But diligence is required in our spiritual lives as Christians. Taking our faith, we need to add to that faith. And that takes diligence. In the things that are talked about here, we're talking about the diligence on our part for the rest of our lives. When do we ever get to the point in our lives as a Christian, regardless of the number of years that we've been a Christian, that we can no longer add to our faith virtue, knowledge, temperance, patience, godliness, brotherly kindness, and love? But then notice what else Peter says. For if these things are yours and abound, you will be neither barren nor unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. So here's the recipe for growth. Here's the recipe for what I need to be doing as a Christian, concerned with each and every day of my life. Because if I abound in these things, I'm not going to be barren, I'm not going to be unfruitful. And that's what I'm here for, to bear fruit. Jesus said in John 15, you're to abide in me and bear fruit. I'm the vine, you're the branches. So as branches, we're to bear fruit. If we don't bear fruit, what did he go ahead and say in John 15? We'll be cut, we'll be pruned, we'll be cast into the fire. So bearing fruit as a Christian is a very important thing. Here's the recipe for doing it. Now let's look at the rest of it. For he that lacks these things is short-sighted, even to blindness, and has forgotten that he was cleansed from his old sins. Sometimes we forget what being a Christian is all about. What really the point of being a Christian is all about. It's about having forgiveness of sin. And yet that's what complacency does. It allows sin to creep back in. If we're not adding, we're not growing. Remember what I said a moment ago? If that pond, if that lake is not moving, if it doesn't have a stream, or if it doesn't have a spring coming into it, it's going to get stagnant. But if we're not doing some adding, we're going to become barren, we're going to become unfruitful. And then he goes on and says, therefore, brethren, be even more diligent to make your call and your election sure. For if you do these things, you will never stumble. What a recipe. All the ingredients are there. If we will just apply ourselves to them and apply ourselves diligently to them. Then, of course, we're familiar with 2 Peter 3:18. But grow in the grace and knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ, to whom be glory both now and forever. Are we inactive? Are we not worshiping all the time? We talked about that a moment ago. We quoted Hebrews 10:25 a moment ago. Are we not fighting the battle? The battle that's mentioned in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10. Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. There's the battle. None of us are immune. None of us are exempted. Every one of us is in that war. But we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. And then the rest of the verse we're familiar with, the implements of that armor. Friends, if we are inactive, come with me to James. James chapter 2. Begin our reading with verse 14. What does it profit, my brethren, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can faith save him? If a brother or sister is naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you says to them, depart in peace, be warmed and filled, but you do not give them the things which are needed for the body, what does it profit? Thus, also, faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. Someone will say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith without your works, and I'll show you my faith by my works. You believe there's one God, you do well. Even the demons believe and tremble. But did you not know, O foolish man, that faith without works is dead? Was not Abraham our father justified by works when he offered Isaac his son on the altar? Do you see that faith was working together with his works, and by works faith was made perfect? And the scripture was fulfilled, it said, Abraham believed God, and it was accounted to him for righteousness, and he was called the friend of God. If our faith is inactive, our faith is dead. Dead faith cannot, will not, and never will save anybody. Let's look at also at what we see in James 1, verse 22. But be doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man observing his natural face in a mirror. For he observes himself, goes away, and immediately forgets what kind of man he was. But he that looks into the perfect law of liberty and continues in it, and is not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work, this man will be blessed in what he does. Are we inactive? What is our faith? Is our faith dead? Is our faith little? Is our faith great? Is our faith rich? Those are the four terms that I find in the scriptures that are used to describe faith. Where is the degree, if we want to use that word, of our faith? Are we a hearer and not a doer? Are we not willing to change? Are we settled in complacency? Do we like the way we are? Or do we ever think, maybe, just maybe I could be stronger? Don't we see any real need to change? The psalmist said in Psalms 55 and verse 19, God will hear and afflict them, even he who abides from of old, Shelah, because they do not change. Therefore, they do not fear God. So, do we see any real need to change? If we don't fear God. Has our heart become hard and calloused? Like what we read about in Hebrews chapter 3, verse 7. Therefore, as the Holy Spirit says today, if you will hear his voice, do not harden your hearts, as in the rebellion, in the day of the trial in the wilderness, where your fathers tested me, tried me, and saw my works 40 years. Therefore I was angry with that generation and said, they always go astray in their hearts, and they have not known my ways. So I swore in my wrath that they shall not enter my rest. Beware, brethren, lest there be in any of you an evil heart of unbelief in departing from the living God. But exhort one another daily, while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. So that's been our study, to see if whether or not we can learn from others what it means to be settled in complacency. To see if we cannot learn from others how easy it is for them and how easy it is for us to be in that same boat. We have looked at the phrase settled in complacency. We've looked at the context to help us to see what brings it on. And we've tried to the best of our ability to make the application to me, to you. Let us not be settled in complacency. If you're here this day and are not a Christian, could it be that you're settled in complacency? That you're satisfied where you are? That you have some of the very things that we've talked about here? You have not really the fear for God that you need to have? That whether you do right or wrong, God's not going to do one way or the other? Have you been one that has been bought into this story that, well, because God's judgment is reserved, I have time? What's all of the things that causes you to be settled in your complacency? And the same applies for those that are Christians that we talked about to begin with, like Judah, that are in sin. It's easy to become settled in complacency. For the very same reasons that someone may not even want to obey the gospel, are the very same reasons why some Christians don't want to acknowledge their sin and repent and confess it. Complacency. Let's get out of that comfort and realize the danger that we're in. Remember the definition that we gave for complacency is satisfaction with no view of the dangers. Let us be aware of the dangers. The day of our death is coming. The day of the judgment of God is coming. We don't know when for either one of those. By all means, let us not be complacent. And if we can assist you in either of these things, please let it be known by coming to the front while together we stand to sing.